Hero or villain? When Christopher Columbus first set foot on the New World, the celebrated hero who discovered America is about to be unmasked. What terrifying truth!
Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, but by 1476, he had moved to Portugal.
In the 15th century, the urgent need to find a new route to the east spurred him to propose a voyage across the Atlantic.
After being rejected by Portugal, he secured funding from Queen Isabella I of Spain.
On August 3, 1492, Columbus departed, leading 3 ships, the Santa Maria.
The journey dragged on, filling the sailors with fear and a desperate desire to turn back.
But natural signs, birds, floating branches, saved the voyage. At 2 a.m. on October 12, 1492, land appeared. Columbus set foot on San Salvador Island. Believing he had reached the Indies, he called the native people Indians.
Initially, Columbus praised the friendliness of the Taino people.
But in his diary, he wrote that they would make excellent slaves because they were docile and easily commanded.
He kidnapped natives to guide his expedition in the search for gold. The expedition reached Cuba, where they learned about tobacco for the first time. Greed surged when they heard tales of the island Babeque, rich in gold. The captain of the Pinta secretly broke away from the convoy to search for treasure. On Christmas night 1492, the Santa Maria ran aground.
Columbus used the wreck to build Fort La Navidad, leaving 39 men to guard it. This was the first step in colonial occupation.
Columbus returned to Spain, bringing back gold and native prisoners to claim success. Despite losing the Santa Maria, he painted a picture of riches to secure further funding.
The new goal: establish a colony and spread Christianity.
When returning to Fort La Navidad, he found it burned down. All the soldiers had been killed due to conflict with the natives groaned.
Columbus built a new settlement, La Isabela, but it failed.
He became brutal, forcing sailors to swear that Cuba was the Asian mainland, or face having their tongues cut out.
In Hispaniola, he and his son ruled despotically. Natives were forced to hand over gold.
Humanitarian disaster unfolded. Diseases like measles and smallpox from Europe wiped out the indigenous population. Forced labor. Columbus enslaved thousands, sending them to Europe to be sold, though many died en route. In 1498, Columbus undertook his third voyage, discovering South America. He believed the immense Orinoco River suggested he had found a new continent, or even the Garden of Eden.
However, his health declined, and his mind became paranoid. Internal strife erupted in Hispaniola.
The Spanish crown sent an investigator. Columbus was arrested, chained, and sent back home for corruption and brutality.
In 1502, he was allowed one last voyage, but forbidden from returning to Hispaniola. By 1504, Columbus returned to Spain, sickly. His patron, Queen Isabella, had died. He spent his final years in disappointment, still deluded about the great discoveries he claimed. On May 20, 1506, Columbus passed away.
Columbus left behind a deeply controversial legacy.
In navigation, he was the pioneer who connected the two halves of the world.
In humanity, he was the initiator of cultural destruction and the massacre of the native peoples of the Americas.
The darkness behind the explorer's light must never be forgotten.
Let us return to August 1492,
the tense atmosphere before the departure.
The sheer audacity of sailing into the unknown Atlantic.
Mutiny brewed constantly among the apprehensive crew, far from home.
Then, a sign, a twig, unmistakably from land, drifted by.
The cry rang out, "Tierra! Land at last!"
He claimed the island for Spain, naming it San Salvador, convinced he was in the East Indies.
The first contact was superficially peaceful.
His private notes revealed his assessment. Readily exploitable people.
The relentless pursuit of gold began immediately. Natives were conscripted as unwilling guides.
They learned of local customs, like the use of smoking leaves.
Whispers of Babek, the island of pure gold, drove the expedition into obsession.
The Pinta broke formation, chasing its own feverish dream of wealth.
Christmas Eve brought disaster when the flagship, the Santa Maria, struck a hidden reef.
From the wreckage rose La Navidad, the first tentative foothold of European power.
He spun tales of easy conquest and immense potential wealth to secure a second, larger fleet. The second voyage launched in September 1493, bringing 1,200 soldiers, settlers, and priests.
The goal was now unmistakable: subjugation and conversion.
Upon reaching La Navidad, they found only ashes and death, a direct result of Spanish arrogance.
A new settlement, La Isabela, was established, but hope quickly soured into failure.
Columbus descended into tyranny, his authority maintained through psychological terror.
He coerced his men into swearing that Cuba was Asia, or face mutilation.
The demand for gold became absolute in Hispaniola.
Failure to meet the quota resulted in amputation or execution.
The genocide against the Tainos began in earnest.
Old world diseases, miles, smallpox, were devastating vectors of death.
Thousands were enslaved and forced onto ships bound for Europe, a deadly transit.
The population collapsed from 250,000 to a mere 14,000 in a few short decades. Despite the horrors, Columbus sailed again in 1498 on his third voyage. He discovered South America, citing the colossal mouth of the Orinoco. He became convinced this was the very edge of paradise, a physical location on Earth. His health failed, and his paranoia deepened while back in the colony.
Columbus was arrested, stripped of his authority, and shackled for corruption and cruelty.
He was sent back to Spain in chains, a prisoner of the empire he helped create. In 1502, he was permitted one final voyage, explicitly barred from the troublesome Hispaniola.
This final journey was characterized by relentless storms and ultimate failure near Panama.
By 1504, he returned, physically broken.
The death of Queen Isabella removed his last powerful protector.
He lingered in bitterness, clinging stubbornly to his self-aggrandizing narrative.
Christopher Columbus died on May 20, 1506.
His legacy is a profound dichotomy. He was the mariner who mapped the unknown, linking worlds.
Yet, he initiated the cultural annihilation and mass murder of the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
The shadow he cast will forever accompany the light of his voyages.
Returning to the tension of the first landing,
in October 1492. The initial exchange of curiosity between two radically different worlds. Beneath the surface descriptions lay the blueprint for servitude.
The search for gold became a violent intrusion into Taino life. The lure of the mythical gold island of Babeke overshadowed all reason. The night the Santa Maria met its doom on Christmas Eve. The remnants of the flagship became the foundation of an occupying force. Columbus departs with his proof and his prisoners, facing the return journey.
He returned to boast of his success to Isabella and Ferdinand.
The promise of easy riches fueled the funding for the massive second expedition of 1493. Colonization and forced conversion were now the primary mandate. The return to La Navidad revealed a massacre born of Spanish cruelty. La Isabela began, an attempt at order that quickly descended into hardship.
Columbus's rule became arbitrary and terrifyingly absolute. The penalty for questioning the geography was gruesome physical punishment.
The unending demand for tribute crushed the local population.
The first wave of mass death swept across the island.
Diseases carried across the ocean proved unstoppable. The enslavement program was industrialized, shipping human cargo like any other commodity.
The third voyage brought Columbus to the southern continent.
His mind, twisted by disease and paranoia, interpreted this as the literal threshold of paradise.
Back at the colony, the settlers turned against each other and against Columbus.
The man who imposed chains found himself wearing them again, returned to Spain in disgrace.
His final passage was a mere shadow of his former glory, forbidden from his primary conquest. The journey was a relentless battle against the ocean itself.
His influence waned. His champion, Isabella, was gone.
He died clinging to a vision that history had already condemned. The end of the man who changed the map.
His legacy is written in gold and blood. He achieved unprecedented navigational feats, connecting continents. But that connection came at an unimaginable human price.
Let's examine the roots of this ambition back in Genoa.
This Pudapuerete. His move to Portugal exposed him to the world's leading maritime thinkers.
The proposal to sail west to the east was bold, perhaps foolhardy.
Spain, eager for glory, finally offered the necessary backing.
Santa Maria, Pinta, Nina, a small fleet carrying enormous historical weight.
Weeks blurred into endless blue, testing the limits of human endurance.
Then the scent of land carried on the wind. San Salvador, the site of a foundational error in nomenclature.
His outward benevolence masked an immediate, calculated exploitation plan.
The diary reveals the true purpose behind the friendly facade.
The quest for gold superseded all concepts of peace or respect.
The commander of the Pinta
prioritized treasure over discipline. Christmas Eve, 1492. The loss of the flagship. The first foothold established, an armed base.
Columbus returns, showcasing captives and a promise of vast wealth.
His successful presentation ensured massive royal investment for 1493.
The Second Armada arrives, focused on permanent settlement and religious conversion.
The horror that greeted them, the destruction of the first fort due to Spanish misconduct.
A new, more robust colonial center was ordered into existence.
Columbus wielded fear, enforcing loyalty through threats of mutilation.
The enforcement of the gold quota became the primary mechanism of terror.
The penalty for failure was brutally enforced, leaving stark warnings.
The population began its devastating freefall.
Introduced diseases ravaged populations with no immunity.
The transatlantic slave trade component of his legacy began here.
The discovery of the mainland, South America, during the third trip.
The immense Orinoco convinced him he had found Eden's edge.
His authority crumbled as frustration and internal conflict mounted in Hispaniola.
Royal investigators arrived to assess the chaos and corruption Columbus had fostered.
The admiral was taken into custody, humbled by his own sovereign.
He endured the humiliating journey back to Spain, shackled.
His final commission barred him from his first and most brutal colony.
The last voyage ended in failure against nature and geography.
His powerful ally was dead, leaving him vulnerable.
He died clinging to the fantasy of his discovery while ignored by the court.
The long silence fell on May 20, 1506.
Columbus, the nexus of progress and atrocity.
He forged the permanent maritime link between hemispheres. A civilization was fundamentally erased by his ambition.
The story concludes not with glory, but with profound moral reckoning.
Back at the start, Genoa, where the seeds of the Atlantic obsession were sown.
It was in Portugal that his theoretical navigation skills were honed.
Isabella's faith, or perhaps desperation, finally swayed the decision.
August 3rd, 1492. The commitment to the unknown.
The sailor's fear manifolded as palpable dread on the water.
A simple branch, signaling the end of uncertainty.
The ritualistic claiming of the land for the crown.
The enduring error of calling the people Indians.
The initial observation of the Tainos was purely utilitarian.
The documentation of their future servitude was meticulous.
The path inland was paved by forced local knowledge.
The myth of Babek became a fever, driving the expedition further afield.
The Pinta's unilateral decision signaled a fracture in the mission's unity.
The grounding of the flagship marked a disastrous halt. The creation of Fort La Navidad, a permanent projection of power. Columbus returns, bearing treasures and human trophies.
The lure of gold secured the funding for 17 more ships.
The second wave arrived with clear intentions of conquest.
The discovery of the garrison's fate, a brutal retaliation from the natives.
The optimism of La Isabela quickly dissolved into colonial hardship. Columbus ruled with an increasingly iron and paranoid fist. The pressure to validate Columbus's geographical mistake was absolute.
The system of forced gold collection created immediate conflict.
The punishments for non-compliance were designed to terrorize.
The indigenous population faced systematic destruction.
The immunological devastation wrought by European germs. The brutality of shipping human beings for sale in Europe.
The magnitude of the Orinoco hints at a true continent.
His final geographical belief was one of divine proximity.
Internal revolt plagued the colony as Columbus's grip weakened.
The Crown sent officials to investigate the rampant abuses.
He was arrested and returned in the very shackles he used on others. The journey home was one of profound humiliation and stripped authority. His final commission was a consolation prize, fraught with difficulty. The final voyage was defined by violent storms and navigational failure. With Isabella gone, Columbus lost his political leverage.
He faded into obscurity, still defending his flawed vision of the world.
The young indigenous explorer died, leaving behind a complicated, blood-stained map. His entry into history is permanently dualistic. He achieved the impossible feat of global connection.
He initiated the wholesale destruction of thriving cultures.
The mark of Columbus remains indelible and dark.
To understand the man, we must look at the ambitious youth in Genoa.
Portugal was the crucible where his westward dream was forged. The Spanish crown held the key to his ambition. The three small vessels prepared for the immense journey. The ocean seemed to stretch into infinity. testing morale daily.
The relief brought by sightings of coastal birds.
The physical act of planting the flag of conquest.
His real mission was already written behind his eyes.
The first human cargo destined for European scrutiny.
The pursuit of Babeke intensified the exploitation.
The Christmas Eve disaster shattered the primary vessel.
A desperate measure to maintain a foothold. The report to the monarchs was strategically crafted to ensure future funding. The second voyage, mobilized with unprecedented scale.
The discovery of the massacre served as a grim lesson in colonial arrogance. The establishment of La Isabela proved unsustainable under Columbus's command.
Loyalty was secured through the constant threat of bodily harm.
The gold quota became a tool of systematic oppression.
The consequences for failure were swift and permanently disabling.
The indigenous population vanished at an alarming rate.
European pathogens proved far more deadly than any weapon.
The chilling reality of the forced labor export system.
The site of the Orinoco hinted at an undiscovered mainland.
He saw not South America, but the gates of paradise.
Columbus's grip slipped as disorder spread among his own men.
The Crown dispatched agents to curb the chaos and corruption.
The ultimate fall from grace, arrest and imprisonment.
He sailed home, a prisoner of his own imperial success.
The fourth voyage began under severe restriction and failing health.
The voyage to Panama was a relentless battering by nature.
The death of his royal protector sealed his political fate.
He spent his final years isolated, clinging to his misunderstood achievements.
The explorer passed away in May 1506.
His legacy is a study in contradiction.
He physically inaugurated the era of global linkage.
The cost was the eradication of entire peoples.
History demands we see both the discovery and the destruction.
Before Spain, Portugal saw no profit in the bold Western plan.
Isabella saw opportunity where others saw madness.
The commitment was made. The voyage began. The crews approached the brink of mutiny daily.
Land was signaled just as hope was fading. The first exchange was defined by wary curiosity.
Two narratives existed in the same private record.
Kidnapping for guidance and servitude began almost immediately.
The myth of Babeke acted as a powerful catalyst for greed.
The Pinta broke ranks to pursue personal treasure.
The wreckage on Christmas Day altered the course of the mission.
The first permanent structure was hastily erected from salvaged materials.
Columbus returned to Spain to report his findings and secure backing.
The scale of the follow-up expedition promised colonization, not just exploration. The site of the destruction confirmed the violent failure of the first outpost.
The second settlement quickly succumbed to hardship and mismanagement.
Columbus manufactured geographical reality through threat.
The gold quota became the engine of oppression and revolt.
The punishments enacted were barbarically severe.
The island's original inhabitants were systematically decimated.
The introduction of Old World contagion was catastrophic.
The commencement of mass forced relocation across the Atlantic.
The South American coast revealed the true scale of the Americas. He interpreted the vast river as a signpost to the Garden of Eden.
Internal strife undermined his authority as settlers grew restless.
The Crown intervened to assess the state of the colony.
He was stripped of command and imprisoned for his brutality.
His return was marked by public humiliation.
His final trip was explicitly forbidden from the scene of his worst crimes.
The final expedition was battered into failure.
The loss of Isabella meant the loss of his final shield.
The end arrived in May 1506.
The genocide he enabled cannot be separated from the discovery.
We must remember the cost paid in the darkness he brought.